Hello, everyone. I'm Yamiz Bachkhaz, and you are on an episode of the CRO online talk show From the Heart, Gum Къыдэкlэу. Today, we have a very special guest joining us, Dr. John Colarusso. John has a PhD from Harvard University in linguistics and is a professor at the McMaster University of Hamilton in Ontario. Without John and his research, studies, podcasts, books, publications, studies all around the world that he's done with different professionals, linguists, local Circassians, and all the keynote speeches, lectures, moderations, all of that information. Without all of that research that he's done, Circassians would in fact be steps behind where we are today. And not to take away too much from John's own introduction, John, I would love if you could tell us more about yourself and what is the main content of the professional work that you do. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Yamiz. I do have that training in linguistics, and so I have spent a lot of time in my career writing articles about Circassian and some of the unusual things the language does, and also writing a grammar. So I've written 2 grammars of Kabardian and a short grammar of Jadot. Jadot is just sent back to me by the editors for some slight changes and all. So that'll be out later this year, electronically apparently now. Nothing on paper anymore. Save the trees. And I also do comparative mythology, and what little Circassian I know, I learned from 2 gentlemen in New Jersey, Rashid Dahabsu, which was a rendering of Tarapso, and Isa Tarqlah. Tarqlah is a dove, a son of God, actually. Literally a old Christian symbol of some sort. Khor is like someone who increases things or breeds things. So Isa and Rashid. And then a little later, I had Majda, help from Majda Hilmi for Kabardian, and she became my milk sister. Now all 3 are dead, and that's too bad. But when I came to Canada from Harvard, I would go down once a month to New Jersey, which is where I'd grown up, so I was familiar with New Jersey. And I would work with Rashid and Isa and Majda. But when I came here to Canada, there was nobody. And this was in the days before Zoom, of course. And so I decided to translate something in the languages to keep the languages alive in my head. And so Isa and Rashid helped me with Nart sagas, picking out some Nart sagas. This is a good one. You should look at this one. That's interesting and whatnot. So I spent that time. They would help translate a bit. They would give me literal word-for-word translations of some of the sagas, maybe 5 or 6. And the rest I had to work out on my own with a dictionary given to me by Rashid, and volumes of the sagas given to me also by Rashid, and grammars and all. So it was a project that I found fascinating, because the folk tales, the Nart sagas or Nart tales, what do you call them? It's not clear what they are in terms of folklore. They're fascinating, and they have all kinds of parallels with tales from Ireland or from India, tales from Russia, tales from Greece, and so on. Surprisingly, not much from Turkish or Turkic, like Karachay Balkars that live up in the hills and back in your homeland. Not much from that. So that was fascinating. And then it sat in a drawer, file drawer, for about 10 years. And my wife one day said, "What's in this drawer? Let's clean a house. What's in this drawer?" I said, "Oh, it's some tales I translated." She said, "What are they doing sitting in the drawer? Send them off, get it published." I said, "Okay." So I did, and they appeared in Princeton University Press's myth series called the Bollingen series. So there's that. And then there was one, Circadian, because I had also done, had been an old Digoran Ossetian speaker down in New Jersey too, and I'd worked with him because I was taking Farsi at Harvard. And then I took Farsi at Harvard and Old Georgian, both. And so I did some work on Digoran and Farsi, and then I did some work on Georgian. The language I first learned was Ubach, and I learned that with the help of a Norwegian linguist named Hans Vogt, who's dead now also.
That's interesting.
Yeah, Ubach. And I was told I had a perfect pronunciation, absolutely perfect pronunciation, because there was a professor that I would read it off to him, a guy at Harvard named Jay Jasanoff, and he was very patient. He'd listen to me, and I read off something, and then he'd hear the tape, and he says, exactly. You know, I was even accused by some Circassians of speaking with an Ubach accent. The vowels were a little off.
Wow.
Not quite Circassian vowels. And then Abkhazian and Abaza, and so I went through all the major languages of the family. So now I'm known for the grammars, I guess. I'm known for the Nart tales, and I'm also known, I guess, because I reconstructed the mother language from which
the advancements to the literature and the language itself.
Yeah, and the mother language, and then I compared the mother language to a very famous mother language called Proto-Indo-European. And I made the case that they were related somehow at a very distant level. And there were two scholars that bought it, three that believed what I had done, and the rest scorned it. This was done about 30 years ago. And just 2 years ago, I received word from a geneticist through a friend in Arizona, another linguist in Arizona, saying, tell Colarusso that he's been vindicated, and he's lived to see it. So the genetics also links the Circassians to the people in the Yamnaya culture, just to the north of the Caucasus and the prairies or steppes. And it thought that the Yamnaya culture was the culture of the Proto-Indo-Europeans, and they invented nomadism or something, and they spread out all over the place and brought their language with it. So you can find words, you know, like they called themselves Aryo, and this is in the East, it's Aryan, which is not the Nazis used and abused, crazy people.
Yeah.
And then you get it in Irish as Erim, Boerim, Boerig, rather. Boerig means the cow Aryans. Bo is cow, cow Aryans. So there must have been nomads in ancient Ireland still running around grazing their sheep. Aristos, aristocracy, Ari, you know, that's the root. And Adiga is the same root in Circassian, and the D comes from an R. And if you go to Ubach, the A comes off. It's just a definite article, so it's a riddle. Yes. And then if you go to Abkhaz and Abaza, it's Ra, and Ra is a suffix on a tribal name. I mean, so-and-so people. And so it's it's a common word from which Aryo comes in Indo-European. So the original must have been Arigo, something like Arigo. Something like that. And that's one link. And there were about 60 some odd other links like that.
Wow.
And now the linguistics community is interested in that again. And they had a volume in one of the journals devoted to that. And they wanted my comments on some of the articles and so on and so forth. Yeah. So it's very interesting. Your people, I think, played an absolutely crucial role in history. And it may have been a long time ago, it may have been early Bronze Age, you know, but maybe 3,000 years, 4,000 years ago, let's say 5,000 years ago. But it was crucial. It was a crucial role, and it's gone entirely unrecognized. There are other features about your culture that we could discuss that
well, I mean, Circassians
link you to other ancient peoples like the Spartans and people like that. Yeah.
Circassians weren't very good at recording their own history, from what I've heard, but it was more about the other surrounding countries and peoples that were more writing about us.
Well, it was a tough neighborhood, and you spent all your time fighting to survive.
Yes.
All your spare time. Yeah.
And just based off of what you said, I already came up with a ton of different questions. But let's just start from the beginning.
Yes.
How did you first learn about Circassians?
Well, I started in physics, and I had a big scholarship. I was a very poor boy, so I had a big scholarship to study physics. But it turned out that my supervisor wanted that scholarship for his nephew, and he contrived a way to basically take it away from me. And in the 1960s, there's nothing you could do. So I didn't know what to do. And the dean said, well, this isn't right. We'll give you another scholarship. So I got another scholarship. And they wanted me to do, but it was from a different faculty. It wasn't from science anymore. So I had to pick something else. And I said, okay, I'll do philosophy, because I took a couple of electives, and they have a lot of logic, philosophy of math, all that, And it turned out that I had to take ancient Greek. And it came out that I was a polyglot, that I could think in ancient Greek very quickly after a month or two of studying some of it. So then I went from ancient Greek, and I moved for a master's out to Evanston, Illinois, where every day I had to pass by an Armenian church with a strange Armenian alphabet on signs. And so I started stopping by and studying Armenian twice a week at night when they had little classes for the community. And then I went to Harvard, and I studied Farsi and Old Georgian. And I was in the Middle East Center, and I applied for a position in the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. But at the time, this is 71, at the time I predicted that the Shah would fall and that Iran would turn against the West. And so
this is where your political expertise comes into this.
That's where my instincts came in. And a guy said, apply again, young man, when you know something. And I said, I can't work with these people. So I decided I would pursue an academic career. And so I went into linguistics, and there I studied Old Georgian and Farsi. Well, Farsi and Old Georgian I did in Deepwater, and I did in Middle East Center. And then in the linguistics department, this professor, like the first week, comes up to me with a cassette. He said, my friend in England recorded this language. He says it has only 2 vowels. I think it's full of shit. You listen to it and tell me what you hear. And it was an art saga in a baza. So I spent a month basically listening to this cassette, and I wrote it all down, transcribed it all phonetically. And that's the opening line. I can still remember it 40 years later. Right?
Wow. So, impressive.
I said to him, I said, yeah, I said, this language is like a mirror image of what most languages are doing. I said, it only has 2 vowels. In most languages, the consonants anticipate the following vowel. So if you're going to say the word K-E-Y in English, key, that K is further forward in the mouth because it's anticipating the position of the following E. Yes. If you have a car, it's further back because it's anticipating the position of the A. Okay. Now, with your language, and we interpret those variations as immaterial. We don't even hear them. You got to be trained to hear them. And that's what 99.9% of all the world's languages do. Okay. Well, apparently now there are about 33 that have been found, but yours was the first one. Found separately by several people who came up with the same analysis. That is the consonant that's coloring the vowel. It's the other way around. And so this is where you end up with huge numbers of consonants, but only 2 or 3 vowels. Okay. And so that amazed that professor when I explained it to him. I said, this is what's going on and whatnot. And he said, well, why don't you go down to New Jersey, or here's my friend Hans Vogt, and he's got this Ubik stuff. Go down to New Jersey. There's some people down there. You know? So it was through a baza that I actually got into the whole thing, whole Circassian thing. And being a good mimic, the consonants didn't bother me. I never had any trouble with man, or to die, or that kind of stuff. And the complexity of the languages, I think, is unlike anything I've ever seen anywhere else. There are some native North American languages that come close, but they say they lack the number of consonants or something. The sound system is very simple, but the way they put the verb together may be fancy or something like that. But your languages, at every level, they're complicated. They're complicated in terms of sound. They're complicated in terms of the way they make up words. They're complicated in terms of how they inflect verbs. And absolutely crazy. They're complicated in terms of the way they put together sentences. And so everywhere you turn, there is complexity and richness in the languages.
I see. And so, with that being said, I told you previously, I lived in China for 2 years. I studied there, got my MBA, and then I did a semester of Chinese language, learned Putonghua Mandarin, right?
Yeah.
And I memorized 1,000 characters reading and writing.
Okay.
I spoke a little bit more, maybe 11 or 1,200 words. And, you know, on the lists of the most difficult languages to learn in the entire world, you get Chinese, Japanese, and then others. Why is Circassian not on that list?
No one even knows you exist anymore, really. That's the problem.
Because
you have bad public relations.
I don't speak the Circassian. I to a very basic extent, and I can read a little bit. You know, I taught myself to read and whatnot, but it's a lot more difficult than Chinese.
Oh yeah, Chinese. The grammar is actually fairly simple with Chinese.
It is.
It's the sound system that's a challenge, and
memorizing all the characters.
Yeah, and the characters. Yeah, I have a good friend. We were in grad school together. He's a professor at Pennsylvania. He's one of the foremost phonologists in the West, Victor Mayer, and he said every day he would memorize. What was it? He memorized 10 characters every day. No matter what, whether he was sick or whether it was Christmas Day or whatever, every day, 10 characters. And after 10 years, he felt that he had some access to the language because of the silly, crazy writing system they have.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I have dealt with some Chinese here. I coached one on how to actually pronounce English instead of doing this kind of funny Chinglish that they do.
Yes.
That kind of thing. Yeah, but I'm very impressed that you had the courage to go to China and study, and
it was a good opportunity, right? So yeah, aside from that, you did mention your wife is the one that found the book and was like, do something about it. But I want to know, what was it like explaining Circassians to your family? Because they must have been like, what are you doing? Is this a fairy tale? Like, what is going on? Do these people really exist? What is this?
Okay. Well, my wife would come with me to some of the trips to New Jersey, and we'd sit around and talk with Isa and Rashid. And they start out, I say, okay, how do you say this in Circassian? You know, so they start out in Circassian, then they lapse into Russian, then they lapse into Turkish, then they lapse into German, and finish off in English. So by the time we got through the sentence, they'd been through 5 languages. And my wife said, how in the world do you cope with this? How do you?
Oh my gosh.
I said, well, I'll have to ask that question 4 more times for the remaining 4 words. So she saw them directly. She's always sort of liked them. There's a Bjadoch speaker professor at Waterloo University, just to the west of here. He had about 200 families here now, more or less from Syria. And Orphan is not. Orphan is from Syria, but before the rebellion or the revolt. Our son's there once. Our daughter also. I have 3 children. The oldest never. He's a math prof. So they just accept them as nice, friendly people. They don't, you know, when the Circassian comes out and they start speaking in it, which they do at gatherings, they just don't pay attention. They just feel it's beyond them. I did try to teach a little bit to my daughter. So I'd carry her around when she was a toddler and say a tree, I point at a tree and I say, Trugip, Trug is Trugip. Look at the tree. And she would Jihip. She would give me the Kabardian for true. And I thought, well, Kabardian sort of must be like baby Circassian or something. It's gone through some kind of process of simplification in terms of sound. And Kabardians also claim to be descendants, some have claimed to be descendants of the Circassian Mamluks. And therefore they spent some centuries outside the Caucasus, and their Circassian was in some ways degraded in the process. So, I mean, I have heard some history of this and that there was a thing called Eagle's Nest out toward Crimea and so on. but none of that could be documented. It was all just sort of folk traditions.
Yes.
And so I'm not a historian, and I have colleagues who are, and you can't, they won't accept anything unless you can document it. I've always wondered about that, because I say, well, how do you know the document's worth a damn? You know,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
you taking it as an authority here. But that's how they work. And so
So,
I've never done anything on the history of
mhm,
people.
mhm. So in that case, what was it like getting your books and your work published and explaining that to publishers? I mean, did they think it was fiction when you first introduced it, or what really?
Well, the linguistic stuff was hard in some extent, largely because I had enough training in logic and math that I understood that what Chomsky was doing was wrong, or it was incorrect in many regards, many dimensions. This is like when he was just beginning to become popular in the early 70s. And he was just down the road from Harvard at MIT, literally 2 subway stops away, right?
Okay.
So word got back to him that there was this smart ass grad student up at Harvard that said he was full of shit, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I couldn't work on syntax. I had to work on sound. I had to work on phonetics and what they call phonology, which is like the psychological perception of sound.
I see.
And I had trouble getting a lot of my stuff published because it was against what Chomsky said. I actually devised a theory of language evolution that treated the problem as a logical problem and not as a genetic or paleontological problem. I couldn't get it published. And that was a turning point in my career. And I thought, well, I'm going to do more historical work. I'm going to do more mythic work. I did have a tradition of myth in my family. And I had a very strange encounter. Perhaps I should share. I never told anyone this.
Pay attention.
Here you go. I have asthma, and I developed asthma when I was 21, a very severe asthma. I ran in the family. So it was no great shock, but I had a lot of trouble doing exercise and things like that. So I was called up, though, for the Vietnam War. So I had to go through a physical. And I had this note saying this man is a severe asthmatic. So that meant that at the end, I was called out of line and brought into an office to be interviewed by an MD. And I remember it was very strange because we started talking about myth. And he said, well, you're an asthmatic. He said, so you could be in an office, but not in combat. And he said, you got better things to do than be in the military. He stamped me 4Y, which meant that they could have inducted me for paperwork as an office worker somewhere, or an analyst or something like that.
Yeah.
But not as a combatant.
Wow.
I couldn't figure out why he was talking about how we got into the topic of myth, because my work on myth was like 20 years in the future. It was this really weird encounter, and everyone else was out there waiting. We were in there for over an hour talking about mythology. So that was a crucial event in my life.
Wow.
With that doctor. And I try to go back to it and try to remember, how did we get onto mythology?
Yeah.
But
hey, I'm glad it worked out the way it did. Right?
It worked out the way it did. Yeah,
absolutely.
It worked out the way it did. And then there was the Clinton years, where I was a security advisor, back channel diplomat. And
yeah, I saw you did some advisory services with the White House.
Yeah, I did that too. Yeah, and I still have contact, one in Washington, one in Ottawa, and I have recently been interviewed by 3 Iranian journalists, of all things.
Wow.
Because someone knows that I predicted the fall of the Shah. That file someplace.
The fall of the Shah.
That's what he's got to say, you know. And I suggested that the U.S. make the first overture. And in fact, that's what Blinken decided to do. And I sort of wondered if someone wasn't listening in or tapping into the computer.
They might be listening now. Who knows?
They probably are. They probably are. I don't want to sound crazy, but at the height of my engagement with the Clintons, I had an engineer scan my phone line. I had 6 nations tapped into the phone line.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I also had I had bugs in the eavesdrops of the house that had been put there by State Department. Policy planning, State Department. And I had to take the troughs off the edges of the roof.
Wow.
Get rid of those. But that was leaked to me by someone who felt it was not right to do that to me. And I was so often right on what I predicted that they thought I was being fed stuff from Russians. I did have a Russian spy here, had been sent here to work me, one of Primakov's people.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so he was either murdered or killed. It's very sad eventually.
Wow.
He wanted to leave and settle down in Canada because there
Wow.
were a lot of Russians here. It's like Russia, it's like Siberia with the climate. And so they sort of feel at home here. And he wanted to settle in.
My goodness.
He was killed eventually. But
My
so it was
goodness.
a dramatic 9 years. The last year was with W. Bush, and that was a waste of time. Since then, I just sort of settled back and became an academic again.
Yeah. Yeah, we saw. And then, so as far as your academics and your publications, I mean, Nart Sagas, have you ever thought about turning that into a movie or anything?
Well, Princeton wanted me to approach who the heck, one of the computer companies that makes a game called Myst. I can't remember the name of the company. They wanted me to approach them and see if they could it could be made into a computer game. That was their idea.
Okay.
Right now, they're still talking about making a graphic novel of it. Movie. Well, I am in touch with a professor in California who's in touch with all these big movie houses, and there is some idea maybe of doing something like that.
That would be incredible. I mean, especially with where technology is now and CGI and everything. I mean,
well,
it would look amazing on a big screen.
Coppola sold his rights to Disney, right? And apparently he's not happy now. He's got nothing to do. He's looking around for something else.
I see.
And who was the other? There was somebody else. I was also interested in screenplay or something like this. But I'm busy as a prof. I'm quite busy, and with family, I always want to give some time to them. And I just haven't had the time to make up a screenplay or anything like that. And this fellow, Will, as his name, Will Lynn, right now he's busy with a kind of a podcast affair, but he's the one that has all the contacts, and he's interested in doing something like that. They do make cartoons of them in the Caucasus. You can. Yeah,
I've seen YouTube videos and things like that. So
very naive, sort of clumsy stuff, but still, trying to do something. I would say that my publications have triggered an industry that I never anticipated, and that they've made the Nart Sagas a topic of legitimate scholarship and legitimate work. And they've taken it out of the sort of arcane halls of folklore where they're just being compiled and put on shelves, and made part of the public life. And there are scholars now in Eastern Europe are looking at Nart Sagas, and Hungarians and so forth. And Hungarians have some links with Circassians because they were north. They were adjacent to the Circassians for several centuries before they continued moving west. And they picked up one of the groups, the Yaz. They picked up the Yaz group from the Ossetians. And Yaz is an Iranian, Yazidi. Yaz, the city of Yazd in Iran. It means people who are pious. That's what it means in Iranian. So Hungarian scholars are interested in Nart Sagas. Of course, the Circassians themselves are. Even some of the Russians are really sort of want to know. I was by WhatsApp. I attended a conference and asked some questions and so on.
The stories are incredible. I mean, a lot of it unique, but a lot of it relevant to, I guess, Greek mythology. And so that leads me to asking, who is copying who there? I gotta know. I mean, Troy and Sosroku, like Achilles tendon, like the stories of dipping them in the molten iron, I think it was. So
dipping Achilles. The Greek has Thetis, the goddess, his mother, trying to roast the mortal out of him. So they don't understand what's going on. The best preserved example of this is in the Nart Sagas with Sosroku, who comes out of a rock, basically ore. He's born from iron ore or meteorite, and then he's forged and he's quenched, and he's dark like quenched steel, and he's vulnerable where the tongs. So I know this was a great tale. It's best preserved in the Narts, but you get something like it in Norse mythology in Sigurd and the Dragon. You get something like it in, of course, with Achilles and another character named Demophoon. But we don't know much about him. He's just dunked, or he's roasted rather by Demeter.
Yeah.
Let's see, there was another one. They had these vulnerable spots. Another one that's interesting too, and you could ask that same question, is the warrior's moon, the warrior's mark, because there is an Abaza tale in which a farsighted character is looking at people and explaining them to Sosroklo. And he says, "Oh, there's a man with a mark on his forehead." He said, "That's my brother-in-law. He's got a warrior's moon on his forehead." So I know who those people are. They're not enemy. They're, they see these people in the distance.
Yeah.
But you get it in Ireland, a mark on the hero. You get two heroes that do that, Cuchulainn and Diarmid. You have in Thor, gets a whetstone stuck in his forehead, looks like a crescent moon. You get it, of course, I just said in Abaza. And you get it in Japan, or you get it in northwest petroglyphs in northwestern Mongolia, where they show riders with crescent moons over their heads. And then finally in Japan, the samurai helmets have a crescent moon over the nose piece. So this is some kind of very ancient warrior symbol of some sort. What it means, and you ride at night and follow the moon for bearings or something. I mean, who knows what? Who came up with it first? Now, you can ask that about almost any folklore question, any folklore theme. It's the heart and soul question of folklore or mythology studies. And no one can answer the question, because myths and all the good stories pass all over the place. And they migrate all around. Sometimes you can say, well, look, here, this is clearly importation. Something's been brought in here. This is not a local theme. It's been worked into this otherwise local tale. You can do that sometimes. I would say that for the Man of Steel, that you have the original in the Caucasus. I think that's probably true. And probably among the Circassians, where it's most vivid. I didn't see anything in Ossetian that was anything like as vivid. But for the warrior's moon, which I just want to bring up as another example, it's not at all clear to whom that belongs.
I see.
But folklore jumps language barriers. It jumps, to some extent, even cultural barriers. So it's a somewhat different world than just doing historical linguistics, where you really do have control over what's what.
Yeah. I see. And I mean, because of your contributions with the Nart Saga and the Circassian languages, I'm in group chats with Circassians from all around the world, and we're always passing around your stories and different videos you've done and things like that, right? You always come up in the conversation about these things. And
so you can see me. You can't see me. Here. Now you can see me.
Now I can see you. On top of the world. There you are.
Yeah, top of the world. That hides all the clutter in the office here.
Yep.
Okay.
So, I mean, with all of this work that you've done, friends and I and many people have called you the father of our language.
Oh.
Right? And so tell me, how do you feel about that?
I feel enormously thrilled and honored. I haven't heard that one before.
Cool.
I tell you, languages are dying. Lots of languages are dying now. And it's sort of very sad, because it means the community is no longer cohesive. It's changed to some other cultural pattern or whatever.
Yes.
But a lot of those languages, well, they're languages and they're different, but every language has certain genius to it and all that. If this language dies, like Uzbek, and I'm involved now with a couple of Russians and an Abkhazian to try to revive Uzbek. But if Abkhazian or Circassian, if those languages die, those are major losses, because there's nothing else really quite like them. They're so complicated, so rich, that's going to be a major loss. And when I first started working on these, I thought, well, here I am, I'm 25, 26 years old. And by the time I'm 56 or 66, these languages will be dead. And I'll tell you, the problems faced by the diaspora are serious. How do you have a career? What language you want to have your career in? What language do you want to really reason and think about? What are you going to do with Circassian? Just sing some songs? And what's the purpose of it? So I appreciate the anguish that those questions generate. On the other hand, you have a kind of a noble history. And to vanish, have the language vanish would then probably mean another 50, 100 years, and the whole identity is going to be gone too. So I think that somehow preserving it is something that you need to do to respect what your ancestors did, which was to fight off every imaginable possible enemy for thousands of years.
Absolutely.
And to be considered a major regional force for stability and security in that part of the world. I have spoken with some Russians, and I said, if you bring these, you brought some of them back from the Balkans, where they had been scattered by the Ottomans to keep the Serbs under control. Some of them came back, and they went back to the area, and they settled in just fine. There was no problem with the Cossacks, no problem with the Balkars, the Karachai, Mountain Turks, we call them. So you can do this. And I said, these people will be loyal, they're steadfast, and they will stabilize this part of the Caucasus for you. But they're scared of you. They're frightened of you. Dispersed, damaged as you are, they're still scared to death of you. When I first went to meet with my Russian interlocutor during the Clinton years, it was at a restaurant, and I had seen a picture of what he used to look like, and I recognized him. I went up to him and said, "I'm John." He said, "We can't talk." I said, "Why can't we talk?" He says, "Because you're Circassian." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm German and Italian." No, you're Circassian. And I said, "Surely you, as we do, you have a dossier on me, and you've you may not have had a photograph perhaps that was missing." But I said, he said, "Well, that's true. You are supposed to be Italian and German. But if I were Circassian, he was simply frightened. He didn't want to deal with me. He thought that, out comes the dagger, revenge."
Oh man.
That never left me, that encounter. But we eventually ended up having a very useful back channel relationship of trust and information, and it proved very useful to calm the first Chechen-Russian war. But in any event, it was useful, and got a plastic surgery program going and so on. So there were some good things that came out. It was very difficult, 8 years and 8.5 years or whatever. It was very difficult, very demanding. My kids are small. My poor wife at times would have to take care of them all by herself for maybe 3 or 4 days, that kind of thing. So it was fun.
Yeah. So if we stick with, speaking about the language, you have mentioned before, like secret, like languages of Circassians. I don't know if they were within, like within the 12 tribes or outside of the 12 tribes. Can you tell us more about this?
Well, you had a thing called Shakwabza, and Sha is hunt, and Kwabza, Kebza, Shakwabza is the Kwabza. It means hunting language. No, I'm sorry. Shakwabza. Bza is the language. Kwa is to go. So Shikwa is to go hunting, and Bza is the language.
Yes.
The Abkhazians have one too, called woodsman language. And apparently there's still some Abkhazians that know that, but I've never been able to contact them. The Shakwabza apparently is extinct. No one does it. It was a what we would call in linguistics a jargon, a hunting jargon. So there'd be special words, so you wouldn't use the word bear in case the bear in case the bear overheard you. Someone's talking about me. You'd have to say the brown one.
Call it something else, right?
Brown one, or something like that. But that's extinct. There was one other thing. The Degoran man told me this too, but this also relates to Circassian. He said there was a woman's language, and the words were monosyllabic and marked by tone. Sounds like Chinese, huh? And the women across the North Caucasus all spoke it, and they wouldn't speak it to a man. And he said it was called supermena, which in Degoran is something like bird song. It sounded like birds. So I mentioned to Majda, I said, Majda Hilmi, Majida, I said, Abjokwa was her Circassian name. I said, do you know this? Do you know about this language? She said, no. She said, but I know an old princess. She's 98 years old. She lives in Manhattan. I'll visit her and ask her about it. Sure enough, the old princess says, yes, we had this language. And the ladies spoke it among themselves.
Wow.
And she said, would you speak it to this linguist who wants to know? She said, no, it's only for ladies. And so it died. As far as I know, it's extinct. So that's a mystery language. There was this woman's language. The Circassians had it, the Ossetians had it, apparently the Ingush and Chechens had it too. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, my father, when I was younger, and would tell me stories about how the royals had some of their own like jargons and words. It wasn't like a language, but they had things that only the royals knew the meanings to, and other people didn't know the meanings to. And my uncle, he was a polyglot. He spoke 11 languages, and he was able to read and write in 7. He recently passed away. He was in Turkey, but he spoke erkes, he spoke Turkish, Russian, Italian, German, French, English, Spanish, and yeah, throughout his travels, he lived in the Caucasus for quite some time as well. He told me that the etymology of the word erkes, what he found out was, and I had a friend who actually requested to ask you this question: where does the word erkes come from? Because we hear people of the sun or sun people, and the one my uncle told me was erkes. Ada is Adam, and Gha is supposed to be from the ribs to, I guess, symbolize like people of Adam and Eve, right?
Okay, yeah. No, if the D is an R, and for example, the word for nut in erkes is de. Okay, the D-E or D-A, however you want to write the vowel. And in Abkhazian, it's ra, R-A. To match it up with ra, which is the so-and-so people, there's a tale where there's Tuzumbi, is a tribe, Tuzumbi, I don't know who they are. Tuzumbi ra is how it's phrased, the Tuzumbi ra, or people. So Tuzumbi people. So if it's aruga like that, then I can etymologize that what they call protoform, reconstructed earlier form. Is the R is preserved in Shepsech as a third person indefinite index on the verbal inflection, whereas in Jadoch and Kabardai it's just the yi. And so that would be a third person indefinite, and the Gha is a collective, so it just means the people, that bunch of people over there. So that's what it would mean. And Cherkess is something else. She mentioned that quickly. In the Odyssey, there's a sorceress named Kirke, and that's the root from which Kirktai and Kirkas, where they come. And it goes through Italian. Okay, in which case the ki is going to be Circes. Okay, that's automatic Italian change in pronunciation. And when it's Turkish, Circes, Sharkas in Arabic, because they don't have a ch, it's a sh. And in English, it came in Circas because it came in before English had chuz. And English grew chuz later.
Wow.
So
oh man, bunch of different ways to say it, of course. So
yeah, that's where that word comes from. So, but erkes is the original word. I mean, if you want some ancient Circadian, the Colchis, the legend of Medea, Colchis is always assumed. The Georgians, you go to conferences, there's always 2 or 3 papers by Georgians on Medea and Colchis and all that. If you look at the names, there's nothing Georgian there. Colchis is in Circassian, meaning mountain, mountain area, hilly area. The brother is Apsurtas, Apswa, it's Abkhazian, so he has an Abkhazian name. Aetes, I mean, who knows where that comes from? It's the father of Medea. Medea is Iranian, and all this. So if you know some languages and you're not culturally biased and set out to appropriate something for your own traditions, well, we'll look at it objectively, scientifically. Circassian stuff pops up all over the place, including on ancient Greek vases, which I deciphered as well. They had Circassian and Abkhazian, or ancient forms of them, on the vase. That was done in collaboration with two other scholars.
I see.
That's my most popular paper. That's when someone reads it every week.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have expected, but that shows that the Circassians were in Greece, also apparently in Italy, 500 or 600 years before the Christian era, in the middle of the early Iron Age. It's interesting.
So what were Circassians, Cherkess, or Adyghe known as before, I guess, these names might have come to existence? I mean,
well, I don't know. One thing is that there's an ancient language from what is now Turkey, which is preserved as a ritual language in texts of a language called Hittite.
Yes.
Hittite is an very old form of Indo-European language. And this language is called Hatti, which is where the Hittite word comes from. The Hittites call themselves Nestle, like the candy bar. But that had to do with a nearby mountain or something. Hattik was argued by Ardzimba before he became leader of the Abkhazians, and he was still a linguist, that it was related to Abkhazian. And I've looked at that, and I looked at the work of my friend Slava Chirikpa. Yeah, I think that is the oldest Northwest Caucasian language, is Hattik. But Hattik apparently was the word for silver. So you have to come up with the distinction in name calling. One is what we call an endonym. An endonym is a name that the people call themselves. So if you ask the Germans, who are you? They say Deutsch, which comes from Teuton. If you ask Circassian, who are you? They say, we're people. Then you have an exonym, which is what others call them. So Romans called the Greeks Graiki. Greeks call themselves Hellenes. So Graiki is an exonym. Graiki, Hellene is Hellenoi is endonym. So what were the exonyms of Circassian? I think Adyghe is probably the oldest endonym. That may be Abswa, which is Abkhazian for mortal person. What's the oldest exonym? That's a very hard one. We're not sure.
I see.
Kerkatai was a group of people somewhere around the Caucasus, Eastern Turkey, that's mentioned in classical sources. It looks sort of like Kirke. It looks like sort of the root. But I can't think of any other particular word.
I see. So is it the land of Circassia or the land of Adyghe? I mean, today I wouldn't know what to call it, right?
Adyghe. Palta is region, like Abdzakh.
I see.
The region of the Abadza. They were originally Abadza. They've been Circassianized, Abadzakh.
Okay.
Kach is Western Circassian area, means lowland. Ka is low, and Sh is region again. So Adyghe would be Circassian country.
I see.
Adyghe with an aspirated, that's plural mark.
It sounds strong, and it sounds Adyghe, right? I was never really a fan of Circassia, to be honest. So
yeah, that would be Italian from Greek, somehow exonym.
Yeah.
Of course, there are all the tribes, Kabardai and Chepsech and Bajadok and Changui and so on. They won't want to lose their names. They were functional in some ways, I guess, more or less regional sort of designations. The real thing is the flip, the blood frame. Were like clans, so you couldn't marry someone in the same flip. You had to marry outside, so to maintain genetic vitality. With a lot of people have that kind of custom. Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Hmm.
I want to throw a bit of a curveball at you now with this
Yeah.
question, right? Completely change what we were talking about. Do you listen to Circassian music, and do you have a favorite singer or song?
I have some cassettes that I listen to. There's one that I really enjoy. I think Chad. I think I Chad. Yeah, I think I Chad. But I don't know who's singing it. I'm trying to look at the shelf. You can't see from the planet Earth here, but there are shelves. And I'm trying to see if the cassette is there. Yeah, no, but I don't know who.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you do at least own some Circassian music.
7 or 8 cassettes. Yeah, a fair bit. I have a whole tray of Nart sagas of Canon cassettes. Of course, cassettes now are a bit of a problem. The car, at least my car, has a cassette player. I'm toying with the idea of taking them into a local place here and having them put on discs.
Yeah,
kind of thing. Yeah,
it wouldn't be a bad idea. I mean, maybe a lot of people don't have access to that kind of music anymore.
No, exactly. Yeah. Well, you know, some years back in the 70s, there was a language in northern, but beyond the Arctic Circle in Norway and Sweden and Finland called Lappish. And there was these little small people really that herded reindeer. And it was a Finnic language, like related to Finnish, Hungarian, Estonian. And it was going extinct. And one young woman was a kind of a singer, a kind of rock and roll, and something like sort of modern music singer. She started singing in Lappish. And that was enough to turn it around. And that language survived. And I think that this language, insofar as it survives today, survives because of perhaps the music and because of the electric media. And being able to have these websites and podcasts and things like that. What is needed is a good, coherent pedagogical grammar of something in between Kabadai and say Chemgui or Bzadoch, something like Beslane, maybe something that's not too far gone to simplification, but not too fancy, you know? And so some kind of a pedagogical grammar written in that. I know some people that have tried grammars. One fellow grew up in New Jersey, Jonty Yamisha, and he has a wife from Nalchik.
Yes.
And Jonty couldn't understand that Circassian is what we call an ergative language. So it marks nouns in a way different from, say, Latin or German or Greek. And the thing that fulfills the action bears a kind of a simple case on it, whether it's intransitive or transitive. So subject of an intransitive that does the action, sleeping or eating or whatever, and the object of a transitive, you know, being eaten or seeing somebody or something like that. That person will then have the same case as the intransitive. And then the actor will have a special case.
Yes.
And about a quarter of the world's languages are like that. And they're very much concerned whether the action's fulfilled or not. So sometimes the future tense can't be ergative, but in Circassian it can. But some days, like the woman is sewing at the shirts, but it's incomplete. That's going to look like English. That's going to be, you know, subject and object, just like in English. But if she's completed it, then it's going to be ergative. And that's a tricky thing. If you haven't encountered it before, it took linguists, and I was one of the ones leading the parade on this. It took us about 25 years to figure this out and to finally settle on it and make sense of what was really going on.
Wow.
And people are still dredging up languages and saying, look, this is an ergative language. Look at what it does. It supports this idea. It's got this thing that people can't explain, blah, blah. So we have to have someone who's willing to preserve the ergativity. And poor Jonty and his wife, she would say, no, John's right. You got the cases wrong. You can't say this. And, you know. But what Jonty is doing in some ways is what happens to a lot of languages when the speakers move somewhere and are dealing with another prominent language. The dominant language alters the original
Yes.
language.
Okay. So
Sure.
based on that, I mean, we know the Circassian language, and with the Circassians around the world, it hasn't been easy to learn. And I was actually speaking with Jonty a few weeks ago. We were on a Zoom call. He was speaking with a lot of different youths, and I asked him a question about the language. And my question was basically, how do we go from A to B to C to D? There's no real curriculum. There's no place. There's a place to start, but there's not a place to go next when you're trying to learn the language. There's just a lot of information out there, and it's not consolidated, and everyone's teaching it and teaching it differently. But he's working on a course now.
I went through it. I corrected it. I went through 120 some odd pages of it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, he's
several years ago. Yeah.
So he's been working on it for a while, and he did mention a lot of the help that you provided as well. Sure.
I haven't seen anything out of him for about 5 years now, so maybe there's been some.
He's in front of the computer. Progress. He's in front of the computer trying to save the language. So
okay, good for him.
Yeah,
good for him.
But what I would say is we have the issue with Shapsok saying learn Shapsok, Kabardey saying learn Kabardey. So where do we go from here when it comes to trying to learn the language? What is going to be the most efficient way and sustainable way and consistent way for Circassians from different tribes to at least learn it and for it to survive?
Well, it seems that if you speak a Western dialect, that would be something, say, starting with Chimgui, it'd be Chimgui, Abitach, Shapseg, Bjadol, Natchwa, although I think Natchwa is extinct. You have a very fancy language, and it means that you can understand the simpler one because you can hear everything they're doing. You think, well, they're mispronouncing sh as a f, but I understand what they're trying to do, all that. So there's what we call interdialect comprehensibility. It's a mess of a word. Whereas if you speak Kabardai, you can't hear the sounds that Bjadok is making. They're contrasting sh and sh, all these sounds, and you can't hear it, so you don't know what they're saying. You have real trouble. I've seen it in settings where the Kabardais begin to blink and clearly don't understand what's being said because it's being said to them in Chimgui or something. Whereas the other way around, no, it's okay. So I'm almost inclined to think that what should be chosen is something crazy like the literary language Chimgui, for which there are dictionaries and all that. And there already is an existing orthography, although it's Cyrillic. And people in Turkey want it to be in Latin and all that. But I think that there's literature. I think there are Nart sagas are there, and maybe an anthology. See, Hadarat has 7 volumes, and I translated literally like 10%. That's all I did. But I chose with the help of Rashid and Hisa, I chose throughout the 7 volumes. And what needs to be done is someone's got to make an anthology and go from 7 volumes down to 1. And have it perhaps 1 page is Circassian, the other page is English or Turkish or something like that, or even perhaps Russian. And I think that there's got to be something worth reading in Circassian. That's the crucial thing. I think to some extent, I mean, there was a movement. I was at in Nuremberg in Germany 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, and I heard all kinds of dialects and people just babbling in it all over the place. And I thought, well, maybe this language is not as threatened as I thought it was, And there were a couple of young guys, they knew it. And I said to them, like your age, and I said to them, I said, when you speak Atarebze, does the information go through your head quicker than if you're speaking Turkish or English? And they thought for a second, they said, yeah, it does. It's a very efficient language. It delivers information at a very high rate. And that's remarkable. It's one of the most remarkable features about it. And so they were talking it, and they were being proud and patriotic, and they were in an environment where they felt safe to do so, I guess. So there is some residual knowledge, some nascent sort of hidden knowledge of the language that's a little more widespread and a little deeper than I imagined. What you have to do is find a place where you can talk it, or a place where you can read it, And well, I guess, I mean, the US is a great melting pot, Canada not so much so, but the numbers are small. So generally speaking, one needs a population of 3,000 to 5,000 as a minimum to sort of maintain a community that uses the language.
Like Kafar Kaman.
Yeah, Kafar Kama Mehani. Kafar Kama, I think, is Shepsef.
Yes.
But it's lost some of the contrast. It's been simplified. I dealt with someone that had it. Well, I helped an Israeli scholar with a woman who spoke Shepsef. And none of the aspirated fricatives, and there were things that are not there anymore. But that's to be expected. And so something is better than nothing, you know.
Of course.
Now, I was in Wales a couple of years ago, where Welsh, and you see the Welsh written out on the signs and all that. And I didn't hear any Welsh. I made one old lady pronounce a place name, and so I could hear it, and she was a little shy to do so. But later, I was told that the teenagers have revived Welsh because they speak it among themselves, and their parents cannot understand what they're saying. So
the advantage, right?
Yeah, the advantage. So I would say entertainment value is crucial, and I would say also some arena for social interaction is useful too.
I see. So this definitely leads me to asking and saying, first, my late uncle that I mentioned, Adib, that spoke several languages, right, would tell me that when I speak, if I am not speaking in my mother tongue, I am basically lying to myself and the person that I'm speaking with. That's how deep he wanted to get into it. If I'm not using the words that I'm supposed to be speaking, what is coming out is an utter lie to myself, right? And with that being said, I had an encounter with many people on this, but one person in particular who said there is no economic incentive or value to learning the language and speaking the language. And when I asked this person what they do for a living, they said construction. And I said, you hardly have to speak English for that. What do you need to do internationally? I mean, you're not selling anything, you're not buying anything, you're not meeting other corporations. But I mean, with that being said, what is your message to some of these people about why it's important to learn erkes?
Well, I would say if you have to earn money and feed yourself, and you're going to work among people who are part of that effort, you have to be able to talk to them in whatever language is demanded. If you want to relax and be free of social force, social compulsion, the need to make money, and you want to have time all on your own just to be yourself, and then that's the time for erkes. And that links you to thousands of years of warrior history. And it probably would be a different feeling for the world. What your uncle, only a polyglot could say what your uncle said. Because what happens to a polyglot is that when they are exposed to another language, and they started right away. It's not something like, well, I've been at it for a couple of years and now I'm a polyglot. No, they started right away. They immediately shift over and start thinking in that language at a very rudimentary, basic level, and then start building on that. And so the idea, it has to be in your soul to say it. Well, it is. All those languages were in his soul, your uncle's soul, you know. It's because it was a polyglot. And but a normal person will take several years to pick something up. And erkes, I think, is really hard. I think one crucial thing is that spoken casual erkes is a little easier. The verb is not quite so crazy. But if you do writing, you can add more stuff to the verb to make it really fancy and express all kinds of things. So there's all languages have that difference between spoken and written written's always fancier. So, but you know, it's good if you could have some books and accept the fact that that's fancy erkes, and maybe you're going to talk to your friends and whatnot. That would be good. You have culturally, apart from the warrior history, you have some other features I think are culturally crucial. one is you have a fantastic sense of style. You look like very fancy Italians, the way you dress and groom, and the ladies, the men, both, whatever. You have a very modern and stylistic, very fine sense of style. The other thing is that you have this amazing dance tradition that is one of the most spectacular in the world. And I just recently had a friend, a former student who's now an author, science fiction author. Anyway, I flipped him. Was it him? No, it was someone who wanted to study Circassian nationalism. I flipped him to some dancing. He couldn't believe it. He absolutely couldn't believe it. You know.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the various steps have Circassian names or anything like that. I'm sure they probably do. But that's something that could be put on. During the war between Georgia and Abkhazia, a bunch of Circassians decided to make a delegation to Washington, and there were like three charter buses, and this is the community in New Jersey. And I said, well, if you go, put on your national dress if you have it. Okay, most of them did. The women had the fascia and the men had the tse, and boy, the reaction was stunning. I got all these calls out of people, and well, who are these people that are walking? Where do I get an outfit like that? That's really cool, and so on. Yeah. So again, this sense of style, and of course, I think the decipherment of the Greek vases was crucial. That put you on the map as part of the classical world. And I mean, there was, I'll give you an example of that. There was a scene, and the Circassians seemed to have worn what they call Scythian clothing. They seemed to have worn trousers and jackets, tunics, like, as opposed to the Greeks with their togas, right? And the people, the nomads, wore that kind of stuff. And there's this guy getting ready to whip some man that's tied to a frame, and he says, "No rara teblo." And they thought, it's nonsense. What is it? No rara teblo. And I said, okay. I said, that's old Circassian. The two R's reflect three Y's. The only language going to have two R's there is going to be Circassian. And I can tell you what it means. The na is over there somewhere. One of the Y's is a flat open space. Another Y is some against somebody. The other Y is someone doing something.
Oh my gosh.
Te is not only thief. Te was originally a verb meaning to steal, and ble means to pass by. So this man snuck by somewhere over far away and to a barnyard and stole a goose. And the man says, "I stole a goose." In Greek, the guy tied up says, "I stole a goose. I'm going to be whipped now." And there's an old lady sitting there with a dead goose in her lap on the right hand side, saying, "He killed my goose." And so I said, "No rara teblo" means blah, blah, blah. He said, all that in one word. I said, only Circassian can do that. And she said, "Are you sure?" And 3 times she asked me. This is Adrian Mayer, professor of classics at Stanford. I said, "Yes," 3 times. I said, "Yes, yes, yes." And she said, "You just translated the goose vase." I said, "What the hell's a goose vase? I don't know anything about a goose vase." She said, "Oh, it's a famous vase in a museum in New York. It depicts a scene from a lost comedy of Aristophanes. And they have a Scythian policeman going to administer punishment to this thief who killed this woman's goose." And there it is, all there, but we've lost the original. We don't have, we just have this vase. So I was down in New York at a conference, and I took off in the afternoon to go see the vase, but the gallery was closed. And the curator wouldn't let me in because he hadn't read the article. I said, "You read the article, buddy, and then you'll be sorry you didn't let me in to see it." So I've never seen the goose vase. You can get you can see photos of it. So that puts Circassians there, right? The other thing is that there was a professor of history of clothing. I came from the University of Rome, I think, or Padua. And he said what happened before when the Turks were beginning to monopolize the Mediterranean is that the Genoese and who are the other ones, Venetians, they took Circassians from the Circassians, settled them in Italy, and there they went north of the Turks to get the silk and brought the silk so the Circassians in Italy could make the brocade for the garments of the Middle Ages and early modern period, all the fancy silk garments. And he showed me a map where Circassians had settled, and between Naples and Rome was almost solid Circassian area. Okay, and there's an Adige River.
Yeah.
I wonder about that. It's
Mhm.
it's not the earlier name of that river.
Yeah.
And they're scattered all over the place. And Leonardo da Vinci's mother was a Circassian slave.
Wow.
And the Medici, who didn't become the Medici that became a cardinal, he also had a Circassian mother.
Oh my gosh.
So there's a huge Circassian component in Italy.
Mhm.
So maybe this is why I look this way, with the nose and all.
Yeah, maybe you could be. You never know.
Yeah. So your people have had it interesting. I would say keep working at the history. Things will pop up.
Mhm.
And you need the help of a linguist who can spot some of the terms and tableau.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, there were a few others too. There's one, we only published, I was a little pissed at her. We only published about half of what I came up with, or she sent me a stuff. There was one that she has curly hair in Abkhazian. And in fact, it was written over a picture of a woman with curly hair.
I see.
Things like that. Yeah.
So when you were working with Circassians from around the world, did you find a lot of differences between these people, or like in terms of maybe their chabza and the way they act, the way they live?
The last 150, 170 years is time enough for there to be some drifting apart. And I would say that even in the homeland, with the way it's been divided up, there would be some drifting apart as well. And I think that that's to be expected. That's normal.
Yes.
Unfortunate perhaps, but it's to be expected. I think there were certain places where certain problems were more acute than others. For example, Circassian women enjoyed enormous prestige and freedom. They were modeled after Satanaya, so they were considered to be wise, to have intellectual resources that the Irish man had not cultivated, and so on. And the only parallel to that I can think of are the ancient Spartans. And I have sometimes wondered if, in fact, before they came down into Greece around 1100 BCE, if they had been somewhere up north and in touch with the Circassians, and they preserved some similar patterns. But one thing was the hijab. Okay. Now there are still Christian Circassians, there are still Jewish Circassians, but most Circassians now are Muslim, Hanafi, I think.
Yes.
It's Ramadan too.
It is first day, so
first day of Ramadan.
No water for me.
Yeah. So I was at this gathering of Syrian refugees at their New Year's Eve party in Toronto, and three of the women had hijabs on. And there was some tension about that. And they asked me, is this natural? Should Circassian women all wear hijab for modesty or whatever? And I said, well, if you're not honest answer, the answer is no. But this is not even really an Arabic custom. This is something very recent from the civil wars in Lebanon. And the Circassian women always went, maybe a little hat on or something like that. Or if they were married, they might have just put a scarf around their head, whatever like that, which is all across Europe, but not a hijab. That's a violation of the dignity and the status of the woman.
It's clearly a religious.
It's a religious thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So with
that's
that,
an acute problem in Syria, but not in Turkey. Okay.
So with that, do you find other differences or more differences with the Islamic faith and I guess our chabza, because that's always a topic of discussion for Circassians?
Well, all large-scale religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, not so much, but Christianity and Islam, they spread into other zones that already have historically grounded cultural patterns. And there's always this tension and interplay between whose edicts, whose pronouncements should control life and shape life in some way. And eventually, when the religion takes hold in some way, a balance is reached in some form. So I would say that you haven't been immersed in the Muslim world long enough to reach that balance. So it will be part of the dialectic, part of the arguing, and all that goes on will eventually serve to reach and establish some kind of equilibrium like that. But it may be a different equilibrium from the Circassians in Jordan, as opposed to Syria, as opposed to Turkey, as opposed to Israel, as opposed to the US. So there may be different ones. I would say that Chabza dictates sort of the patterns of life and whatnot, whereas the injunctions of Islam or Christianity put moral limits on certain things, not moral obligations.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, for example, I was being part Italian, I was always struck by the idea that a lot of Italians don't adhere to thou shalt not kill. You know, if the mob, you get in the way of the mob, you know, they'll just take you out as an operational procedure. And that's just part of the local culture and Christianity hasn't touched that yet. But for other Italians, it has. So if you're not in the mob, you're just a regular Italian, and hey, it does, you know, you're not going to kill anybody. Okay.
Yeah.
Just as an example that I would know. Another one, perhaps more crucial, is how should Circassian be represented in some way? So I was in Istanbul in 14, and there was this push to come up with a Latin-based script.
Yes, yes.
Now I have a book from Lincom Europa, Lincom in Munich, that publishes all this stuff, and they screwed up, but it has all the Nart sagas in it. It has one in Shepseg, Bjedok, Kabartai, Chemgui, has songs in Chemgui, Ubuch, Abaza, and 2 forms of Abkhaz. And they're all written in Latin script, and they're all analyzed. Okay, so if you want to get some ideas, sit down and start working your way through it. It'd be like a course in basic linguistics. At the same time, it's going to be a course in all these languages as well. But I don't think anyone knows about this, and I probably shouldn't have published it there. I should have published it somewhere else. But it's sort of hidden. It's about $100, and it's out there. And
I see. So that is another topic of discussion that always comes up: is should the Circassian language be in Cyrillic or Latin, and what would be, I guess, the most efficient way to get the most out of the language?
Okay. I thought exactly about this. First of all, the people who want it in Latin tend to be from Turkey, and they want to look like Turkish. And the idea that,
I guess that's the easy way out, right?
That's the easy way out. Yeah. The alphabet gives you a very strong initial impression of a language, whether it's Armenian or Georgian alphabet or Cyrillic versus Latin alphabet, whatever. And I told them, I said, you can't do the Latin without lots and lots of diacritics, because you just have lots and lots more sounds than Turkish has. And they didn't like that. They got upset about that. And I said, on the other hand, the material in Cyrillic, it looks strange, but it's there. The dictionaries are there, the grammars are there, the books are there, the collections of poetry are there, and whatnot. And I said, you won't believe me, but you know, I've gone through like 5 alphabets in my life, and it takes about 1 week to get used to an alphabet. That's it. And you never pay attention to it again. You just keep blasting along in that alphabet. I said, it's really a very superficial thing. It's not like...
I think so. I mean, Cyrillic, it's not difficult to learn either.
No, it's not. You know, they're inconsistent. The only problem is that the Kabartai is written differently from Chemgui.
Yes.
And they should accord that so they look the same. And it's consistent. There was a move to do that, but then Putin sort of screwed everything up. The edicts. But I think they should
absolutely
just go with the Cyrillic. I think.
I already learned Cyrillic, so let's just for a message for the whole world. Let's go with it. I already learned it. That's it.
Now, if someone could scan some of the dictionaries, like Hadakatva's dictionary and Nart collections have been reissued. I
mean, a lot of things would have to be rewritten if it were to be in Latin.
That's right. That's right. If you want Latin, go to my Lincom book. Excuse me, but the thing that I said, there was a fellow there named Mohican Dur who does movies. He's Jordanian.
Yes.
He's my elder brother. and he was pushing for the Latin, and there was an engineer, and he couldn't even hear the sounds of his own language, couldn't tell the word for hand from the word for the. And Mohi is married to a poet named Luba Balagh, Balagova in Russian. And I said, Mohi, if you switch to Latin, all your wife's 7 or 8 or 11 volumes of poetry are going to become inaccessible unless someone sits down and goes through them all and renders them in this Latin.
Yes.
So what are you trying to do? You screw your wife over here? What is the problem here? Leave it alone. Just face up to the fact it's its own language. It's got its own peculiar writing system. Go for it.
Yeah.
And just leave it alone. So you learn some really good for you. and when you read Circassian, do you read Kabardai or Chemgui?
Kabardai, because it's the one that there's the most access to. I look at the materials from Janti Amisha and other people, and Janti has his app Optilingo. And what really got me interested was when I was growing up, I was interested in everything but the language, right? So the dance, the music, the history.
Food is good too.
No, exactly. So all of that. And then what changed for me was the exposure to the language. When I would hear my parents speak it and other elders in the community speak it, and I didn't care so much. But when I started to hear other younger people around my age speak it in front of me, and I wouldn't say I got embarrassed, but having that sort of exposure and standing there and just saying, wow, you know what, it'd be really cool if I knew this language. That's kind of what changed for me. And so then I started to learn, but yeah, I got a lot of bad rep for learning Chinese first. But I am learning. I am learning slowly. So I will.
Well, you had to learn Chinese. I mean, that's like, devoted to make the money. You got to know the language. There are quite a few languages actually that are spoken only in the home. And one of them, Guarani, I think it's Uruguay. It might be Paraguay. I think it's Uruguay. Guarani is spoken in the household, and Spanish is spoken outside. And that's
Uruguay has a lot of indigenous people as well. So they have that's probably why it's spoken at home.
Yeah. Well, Six Nations is just down the road here, Iroquois languages, and I've worked with them a bit. And they started meeting with a prayer in Iroquois. It's a very beautiful sounding language. The young woman from Jordan that I talked with several days ago, on Thursday, she said the sound of the language is terrible. It's terrible, just terrible sounding language. I said, it's very harsh. It's very, very forceful language. And I said that in itself is remarkable. Just the sheer sound of it is extraordinary. It makes use of practically every possible point of articulation in the vocal tract. It makes more use of the human capacity to make speech sounds than almost any other language we know of. So it's pushing the boundaries of what can be done. Ubich, certainly with 81 consonants. And when you know the language, you don't even really hear it anymore. You just hear that you perceive the meanings, and you're automatically processing the sound. So eventually you'll know that you're sort of into it when you stop worrying about whether it's a sh or a sh, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And it's an inevitability in some way, that the actual sounding of it. What you do, you actually listen on two levels. You listen for the meaning, and you also listen a bit for what's being said, because you use it to identify people from different areas. So if I speak in a Southern drawl, you're going to have that kind of thing. And when I was at just our fans table, there were like 12 guys, and one of them had a dialect I never heard before. And it was really strange. It was some Mozdok or something like that, and some kind of screwed up Kabardian or something, and or Beslanais or something. And I could just tell. I wasn't listening to his meaning, but I was listening to his sound. I could tell he was different. Okay, but the others all sitting there, they didn't care. They were just listening to the meaning. except for the poor Kabardians who couldn't understand the Shepso.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Always that east and west, right?
yeah, yeah. There is in New York City, oh God, what's his name? Endangered Language Alliance, ALA, ELA, Endangered Language Alliance. And he was very interested in the Circassian community in New Jersey, and trying to preserve languages and whatnot.
Do you remember his name?
No, I'd have to Google it or something, or do my email, search in my email.
I mean, for us, New York is 20 minutes away from me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, right here. Well, I think he's based in New Jersey, and what does he do? He has something to do with Manhattan. He might be based in Manhattan. I don't remember. Endangered Language Alliance. Yeah.
Well, since this is a recording, I mean, I'll be able to find him. So
Yeah, you can find.
That's why I didn't have to write it down.
No, you don't have to. It's there.
Yeah. So let me ask another curveball question, and then one more. Have you ever danced Circassian, or tried to dance, or danced in a jug, maybe?
I was forced onto the dance floor once in Europe.
Forced, right? Forced.
I'm not very good at dancing, so it was a fiasco. It wasn't very good. And where was that? That's where I first met Mohi Pandura, and I was to dance with the cousin of Majida Hilmi, Majida Hilmi Habjokla. But I can't exactly remember where the conference was. But no, I didn't dance very well. So it's too bad.
Yeah, it's not easy, but
no, it looks easy because it's usually well done, and people have been dancing since childhood, But do you dance?
I do. We have our dance troupe here, and
not say in a pot water and all that.
I don't have a fascia. My own. I don't own one. I did want to go to the homeland last year, summertime, and COVID, and then this year, summertime, but
more COVID, probably for another year.
For Americans, but we do
fascia is only the woman.
Well, the Tse
is a man. Tsia, Tse, yeah. Tse in Kabardian, Tsia and Bzhaduk.
We have them in different colors for the dance group for
good.
Adults and children. So we do performances and things like that. So
and you have a patwar?
Yes. I have one. My father has, I think, two. So he's got a gray one and he's got a black one.
Hajitsa? Hajitsa are the cartridges.
Cartridges, the bolts.
Yeah. Do you have those, or?
I don't.
No, they're very rare. Apparently quite expensive, or quite rare.
I don't know. I just, from what I've seen, a couple friends come back from the homeland with these beautiful and elegant, tseis and everything. I want to go there and get my own custom made, and then that'll be the one that I wear, the one that I rock to CBA, right?
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
So let me ask you, are you currently working on any new projects now? Or anything with Circassians, or what's next for you?
Well, there's the Bzhaduk grammar. There's the revival of Ubuk, in which I want to. I have trouble with font. I had a font and it died. It won't work on modern systems. So I have to get a font somehow, and then spell out the Ubuk and then pronounce it. One of those little audio bars. Someone told me they'd help me do that, but they haven't done that yet. And that's been a couple of years. So we're helping with Ubuk.
Right there, there's another thing my late uncle taught me. When you're dealing with Circassians, you have to have a hammer on their head. Right? They're stubborn, so you got to just keep. That's how you get things done, right?
Okay. Yeah. All right. So Bzhaduk, Ubuk. I have a handbook of myths of Eurasia, I think it is. I have a contribution on the Nart sagas in there. I have to finish off the Ossetian part of that. And There was one other thing. Oh God, what was it? I'm supposed to write up a short grammatical sketch of Kabardai in collaboration with a young Russian scholar. So that was supposed to be done at the beginning of this month. So I had to teach a fair bit.
These things get delayed.
And, I had to teach a fair bit this term, and one course I hadn't taught in about 10 years. So I had to make up all these lectures and all. It took took about 2 days a week. And then there's other stuff, university stuff.
Pop up, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so those 4 things really: the Bjadoch, Kabardai, the Ubuch, and the Nart sagas. Yeah. But that's interesting. No collection of mythology is considered complete now, unless there's a section on Nart sagas.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
That's a sign. That's a sign.
Good. Good. So I've got to say, before we get going, I have to thank you for our time and thank the CRO for this opportunity and this episode. And before parting words, just from me to you, if we had modern day Narts, you would be one of those heroes. Really.
Thank you, Yamiz.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And then for our listeners, johncolarusso.net. Check out the website. Everything you need to find out, everything you need to know is there. And John, thank you again so much.
Okay, Yamiz. Yeah, my pleasure. We'll have to do it again sometime. Yeah,
for sure. And then if you come on down to New Jersey, please reach out, let us know, and we'll present you with the red carpet. We'll roll it out.
Okay, it's a deal.
Sure thing. Okay,
great.
Take care and have a good evening.
So Qamaf means stay well. Qamaf. Okay. Qamaf in Kabardai.
Thank you.
Yeah, Qamaf.
And now teaching me Circassian.
Okay. Yes.
Thanks a lot.